In the thick of autumn, when the leaves transformed into vibrant hues of gold, the air in northern Minnesota was filled with an eerie stillness. The trees, towering and ancient, stood like silent sentinels over the vast wilderness of Voyageurs National Park. Here, the lakes mirrored the skies and the wild terrain sprawled endlessly, untouched by the modern world. But beneath this beautiful facade lurked an unsettling mystery. Park Ranger Tom McAllister had spent over a decade patrolling these woods, but recently an unsettling feeling crept over him as he made his rounds. It started with whispers among the locals, tales of strange sightings that sent shivers down the spine of even the most seasoned outdoorsmen. The reports spoke of a creature unlike anything ever documented in the region, an animal that defied the laws of nature and seemed to evade explanation. Tom leaned against the hood of his weathered truck, gazing out at the dense forest. The last light of day was fading, and the shadows lengthened, deepening the already unsettling silence. He pulled out his notepad, recalling the words of the local fishermen. "Something's out there, Ranger. We see it at night, moving between the trees, quick, low to the ground, but big enough to know it's not a deer." Just a week prior, Tom had encountered a few campers who had abandoned their trip early, eyes wide with fear. They recounted a night filled with strange noises, a low growl that reverberated through the woods, and a fleeting glimpse of something massive moving just beyond the reach of their campfire light. The fear in their voices had been palpable, and it lingered in his mind like a storm cloud. As he finished jotting down notes, he heard the soft crunch of leaves behind him. Turning, he was greeted by Emily, a fellow ranger and his closest friend. She had joined the park service 2 years ago and brought a vibrant energy to their long days of patrolling. "Hey, Tom," she said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "Did you hear about the hunters?" Tom straightened up, his expression darkening. "What about them?" "They didn't come back. Search teams are out looking for them now," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her brow furrowed. "They went into the Northwoods section last week, but their gear was found near the river. No sign of them since." A chill crept down Tom's spine. The Northwoods area was notoriously dense and remote, a maze of trees and underbrush that could easily swallow a person whole. It had its dangers, wild animals, unpredictable weather, but something about this felt different. Did they mention anything strange before they disappeared? Emily hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. "Just rumors. They saw something moving in the dark, something big. They thought it was a bear at first, but then they weren't so sure." The two stood in silence, the weight of unspoken fears settling around them. Tom had always believed in the stories that surrounded this land, the legends of spirits and creatures that roamed the woods, but never before had he felt the need to take them seriously. "Maybe we should head out to the Northwoods, see if we can find anything," he suggested, determination creeping into his voice. "Are you sure? We could just wait for the search teams to do their job," Emily countered, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "Someone has to take the lead. If something is out there, I want to know what it is. We can't let fear drive us," he replied, though even as he said it, doubt began to twist in his stomach. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape as they drove deeper into the heart of the forest. As darkness enveloped the woods, Tom felt the familiar thrill of adventure mixed with an unsettling dread. The headlights of the truck pierced the inky blackness, illuminating patches of trees and the occasional flash of reflective eyes. When they reached the trailhead, they stepped out of the truck, greeted by a heavy silence that felt alive and oppressive. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sound was the rustling of branches overhead. "Ready?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do this," Tom replied, though he felt a shiver run down his spine. Equipped with flashlights and walkie-talkies, they ventured into the woods, the beam of light cutting through the darkness like a knife. As they walked, Tom recounted the stories he had heard from locals, trying to keep the mood light. "Maybe we'll discover a new species of mushroom," he joked, but Emily's laughter was strained. Hours passed as they followed the narrow path deeper into the north woods, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The trees loomed taller here, their gnarled branches twisted like skeletal hands reaching out to ensnare them. The air grew colder, and an unsettling feeling settled in Tom's gut. Suddenly, a sound shattered the silence, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to reverberate through the ground. Tom and Emily froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. It was not the sound of a bear or any animal they knew. This was something different, something primal and threatening. What was that? Emily breathed, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know, but we should get back to the truck, Tom replied, his instincts screaming at him to turn around. But before they could move, the growl came again, closer this time, more menacing. And then, out of the darkness, something emerged. The creature stood at the edge of the trees, partially hidden in the shadows. It was massive, larger than any bear Tom had ever seen. Its fur was dark and matted, blending seamlessly with the night. Long limbs and a hunched back made it appear almost unnatural, its body twisted in a way that sent chills down Tom's spine. Its eyes glinted in the beam of their flashlights, reflecting a predatory intelligence that made Tom's blood run cold. What the hell is that? Emily whispered, taking a step back. I don't know, Tom managed, his voice barely above a whisper, but we need to get out of here. The creature shifted, revealing a snout filled with sharp teeth that glimmered in the light. It let out another guttural growl, a sound that seemed to echo off the trees and reverberate in their bones. Tom felt a primal fear grip him as the creature took a step forward, muscles rippling beneath its fur. Run, he shouted, grabbing Emily's arm and yanking her away from the creature. They sprinted back down the path, adrenaline propelling them forward as the woods closed in around them. Behind them, they could hear the creature's heavy footsteps, a relentless pursuit that drove them faster. The darkness was alive with sounds, branches snapping underfoot, leaves rustling, and the ominous growl that followed them, growing closer with each frantic step. Tom's heart raced as they burst into a small clearing, the moonlight illuminating the scene. In the distance, they could see the faint glow of their truck, a beacon of safety that felt tantalizingly close. Almost there, Tom yelled, pushing himself harder. Emily was right beside him, her breath coming in quick gasps. Just as they neared the truck, a powerful force slammed into Tom from behind, knocking him to the ground. He rolled, scrambling to his feet as he turned to face the creature. It stood there, massive and imposing, its eyes locked onto him with an intensity that froze him in place. Get in the truck, Tom shouted to Emily, his voice a mix of fear and urgency. She didn't hesitate, diving into the driver's seat as Tom fumbled for his flashlight, shining it directly at the creature. The light bounced off its dark fur, but it didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a roar that shook the very ground beneath him. Tom climbed into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut just as the creature lunged at the truck. The vehicle rocked with the impact, and Tom could hear the sound of claws scraping against the metal. Start it, he yelled, panic creeping into his voice. Emily's hands trembled as she fumbled with the keys, but finally the engine roared to life. She slammed the gear into reverse, and they backed away just as the creature lunged again, narrowly missing them. Go, 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 Tom shouted, his heart racing as Emily swung the truck around and sped down the dirt road. The creature chased after them for a moment, but as they accelerated, it fell behind, disappearing into the darkness. As they drove, the adrenaline coursed through Tom's veins, but the gravity of what had just happened weighed heavily on him. He could hardly process the encounter, and the fear of the unknown loomed over them like a dark cloud. Did you see that thing? Emily gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. What was it? It looked like something out of a nightmare. I don't know, Tom replied, trying to steady his breathing. But we need to warn the others. If that thing is out here, it could be dangerous. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the weight of their encounter hanging heavily between them. Finally, Emily broke the silence, her voice shaking. What do? We can't just go back and pretend this didn't happen. Tom nodded, his mind racing. We need to report this to the park superintendent. Maybe we can get a team together to investigate. We can't let people think they're safe out here. As they neared the park office, a sense of urgency overtook them. Tom's hands clenched into fists as he considered the implications of what they had seen. The woods had always been a place of wonder for him, but now it felt like a realm of hidden terrors. When they arrived at the office, they rushed inside, breathless and wide-eyed. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Tom approached the front desk, where Hank, the park superintendent, was busy organizing paperwork. "Tom, Emily, what's going on?" Hank looked up, concern etched on his face. "We need to talk," Tom said, his voice low and urgent. "We saw something out there, something dangerous." Hank's expression shifted from concern to skepticism. "What do you mean dangerous? Is it a bear, a wolf?" "No, it's not like anything I've ever seen. It was massive, bigger than a bear, and it moved differently, almost like it was unnatural," Tom explained, the memory of the creature's growl still echoing in his mind. Hank's brow furrowed, skepticism giving way to a hint of unease. "You're sure? The woods play tricks on the mind, especially at night." "I know what I saw, Hank," Tom insisted, his voice rising. "And we're not the only ones. The hunters who went missing, they might have encountered the same thing." Emily stepped forward, her voice shaking. "We heard it growling. It chased us back to the truck. We barely got away." Hank studied their faces, the tension palpable in the air. "All right, we need to take this seriously. If there's a threat out there, we can't ignore it. I'll call in a team for a search, but we need more information. Can you describe it in detail?" Tom nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He took a deep breath and began to recount the encounter, every detail etched into his memory. As he spoke, he could see the skepticism fading from Hank's eyes, replaced by a grim understanding. "We'll head out at dawn," Hank said finally, "but we'll need to be cautious. If there's a new species out there, we don't know how it will react to humans." The words hung heavy in the air, and Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The woods were no longer a sanctuary. They were a battleground where an unknown predator lurked in the shadows, waiting. The dawn broke over Voyageurs National Park, casting long beams of sunlight through the trees and illuminating the mist that clung to the ground. Despite the beauty of the morning, an undercurrent of tension hung in the air as Tom, Emily, and Hank prepared for the search. Tom's heart raced as he looked around at the small team they had assembled. 4 other rangers joined them, each armed with radios and a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The camaraderie that usually defined their work felt overshadowed by the looming uncertainty of what lay ahead. "All right, everyone, listen up," Hank said, addressing the team. "We're heading into the North Woods. Tom and Emily will lead the way since they had the encounter. Stay close and be vigilant. We don't know what we're dealing with." Tom felt a surge of determination as they set off, the familiar trail now tinged with apprehension. The air was crisp, and the sounds of the forest echoed around them, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Yet, there was something else, something unsettling that lingered just beyond their awareness. As they entered the Northwood section, the canopy thickened, blocking out the sunlight and casting them into a world of shadows. Tom could feel the weight of the trees pressing in on them, as if the forest itself were watching. "Over there," Emily pointed, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's where we saw it." They gathered around the spot, a small clearing where the underbrush was flattened, as if something had been lying there. Tom crouched down, examining the ground closely. There were deep gouges in the earth, marks that looked as though they had been made by claws. "This doesn't look like a bear," one of the other rangers, Paul, commented, his brow furrowed. "These are too deep and spaced apart." Tom nodded, his stomach churning. "Whatever it is, it's big, and it's been here recently." Hank pulled out a camera, snapping pictures of the area. "We need to document everything. If this creature is a new species, we need evidence." The team continued to search the area, scanning the surroundings for any signs of the creature. As they moved deeper into the North Woods, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with tension. The sun hung high above them, but the dense foliage filtered its light, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Suddenly, a distant sound caught Tom's attention, a low growl that echoed through the trees, sending a chill down his spine. He exchanged worried glances with Emily and the others, who were equally alert. "Did anyone else hear that?" Tom asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Yeah, Paul replied, looking around nervously. What was that? Hank raised a hand, signaling for silence. They stood still, straining to listen. The growl came again, closer this time, rumbling through the trees like thunder. Everyone, stay alert, Hank ordered, his voice low. We might not be alone out here. Tom's heart raced as they pressed deeper into the woods, the growl fading into an uneasy silence. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig felt amplified, as if the forest were holding its breath. They continued moving, each member of the team glancing over their shoulders, expecting to see the creature lurking just out of sight. After what felt like hours, they arrived at the river where the hunter's gear had been found. The water flowed swiftly, and the sunlight glinted off its surface, but Tom felt a sense of foreboding settle over the group. Let's split up and search the perimeter, Hank instructed. We'll cover more ground that way. Tom and Emily moved together, carefully scanning the underbrush along the riverbank. As they searched, the air grew thick with an unshakable sense of dread. Tom's mind raced with thoughts of what could have happened to the hunters. Were they still alive? Had they encountered the creature? Suddenly, Emily stopped, her expression frozen in fear. Tom, look. He followed her gaze to a nearby tree, where deep scratches marred the bark, almost as if something had been trying to climb it. The scratches were fresh, and beneath them lay a pile of torn clothing, a jacket and a pair of jeans, both tattered and stained. Oh no, Tom whispered, kneeling down to examine the clothes. His heart sank as he recognized the logo on the jacket. It belonged to one of the missing hunters. This is bad, Emily said, her voice trembling. What does this mean? It means whatever we're dealing with is hunting, Tom replied grimly, the weight of realization settling in, and it might have found its prey. The growl echoed again, louder this time, reverberating through the trees. The team gathered around them, concern etched on their faces. Everyone, back to the truck, we need to regroup, Hank shouted, urgency driving his voice. They turned to leave, but before they could make it far, the creature burst through the trees, its massive form a blur of dark fur and sharp teeth. The growl morphed into a roar, echoing through the forest, and the team scattered in panic. Run, Tom yelled, adrenaline coursing through him as he sprinted towards the truck, Emily close behind. The ground shook with each step of the creature as it chased them, its breath hot against their backs. Tom and Emily dashed through the underbrush, the world around them blurring as they ran. Branches whipped against their skin, but the sting was nothing compared to the terror that propelled them forward. The roar of the creature echoed in their ears, growing louder and more menacing with every step. Keep going, we're almost there, Tom shouted, glancing back to see the dark silhouette of the creature breaking through the trees. Its eyes glinted with a predatory hunger, and the sheer size of it was enough to send waves of panic coursing through his veins. They burst into the clearing where the truck was parked, and Tom fumbled with the door handle, nearly slipping as he clambered inside. Emily was right behind him, her breath coming in desperate gasps. Start it, Tom yelled, his heart racing as he turned to look back at the forest. The creature was gaining on them, its massive frame emerging from the shadows, fur bristling and eyes locked on their escape. Emily turned the key but the engine sputtered, refusing to start. Come on, she urged, panic lacing her voice. Tom gripped the dashboard, his mind racing. They didn't have time for this. He could hear the creature's growl rumbling in the distance, a chilling promise of what awaited them if they didn't escape. With one final turn of the key, the engine roared to life. Emily slammed the gear into drive, and they tore out of the clearing, the truck bouncing over the uneven ground as they sped away. Go, Tom shouted, his pulse pounding in his ears as they raced down the dirt road, the creature's roars fading into the distance. They drove in silence, the adrenaline still coursing through their bodies, their hearts racing in sync with the engine. After several minutes, they reached the park office, and Emily skidded to a halt, throwing the truck into park. Both of them jumped out, running towards Hank, who was waiting outside with the rest of the team. What happened? Hank demanded, his expression a mix of worry and confusion. We saw it. The creature, Tom exclaimed, his voice breathless. It chased us. It's big, Hank. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. The other rangers gathered around, their faces pale as they absorbed the reality of what Tom was saying. Emily stepped forward, shaking slightly. "We found clothing belonging to the missing hunters. It's hunting out there and we barely escaped." Hank's face darkened, a mixture of anger and fear etched into his features. "We can't let this continue. We need to alert the authorities and close off the park until we know what we're dealing with." "But what if it's already too late?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "What if there are more hunters out there?" Tom felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew they had to act fast. "We need to organize a search party and get everyone out of the woods. If that creature is hunting, we can't risk more lives." Hank nodded, his expression resolute. "All right, let's gather everyone and form a plan. We'll need to take this seriously." As the rangers prepared for the search, Tom found himself lost in thought. The creature was no ordinary animal. It was something new, something dangerous. They needed to understand what they were facing, but the fear of the unknown loomed over them like a dark cloud. Hours later, after a flurry of activity, the team was ready to head back into the woods. They had gathered flashlights, bear spray, and other supplies, but Tom felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The knowledge that a predator lurked just beyond the trees gnawed at his mind. As they entered the Northwoods again, the atmosphere felt heavy, almost electric. The sunlight was dimmer now, filtered through the thick canopy, and the sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if holding its breath in anticipation. "Stay close," Hank instructed, his voice low and steady. "We'll move in a tight formation. If we see anything, we'll backtrack and report." The team moved cautiously, scanning the underbrush for any signs of the creature. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the air became, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. "Tom, do you think we'll find anything?" Emily asked, walking alongside him, her eyes darting around nervously. "I hope so," he replied, trying to mask his own fear. "But we need to be prepared for anything. If it's still out here, we can't underestimate it." As they navigated through the woods, they came upon the clearing where they had first encountered the creature. The air felt different here, charged, intense, as if the very ground was warning them to turn back. Tom knelt down, examining the area. The scratches on the trees were still fresh, and the scent of something animalistic lingered in the air. He glanced around, his instincts telling him they were being watched. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind them, and the group turned, eyes wide with fear. A rustling in the underbrush sent everyone on high alert, and Tom felt his heart race. "Stay together," Hank shouted, raising his flashlight toward the sound. But it was too late. From the shadows emerged the creature, larger than before, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It stood poised, muscles rippling, teeth bared in a terrifying snarl. "Get back," Tom yelled, pushing Emily behind him as the creature lunged forward. Chaos erupted as the team scattered, shouting and scrambling to find cover. Tom's mind raced as he and Emily sprinted for the nearest tree, ducking behind its massive trunk just as the creature barreled past them. "What do we do?" Emily gasped, her face pale as she clung to Tom's arm. "We need to get to the truck. We can't let it corner us," he replied, his heart pounding in his chest. But as they made a run for it, the creature was already on their heels, its growls echoing through the forest like a death knell. They dashed toward the clearing, adrenaline fueling their desperate flight. Just as they reached the edge of the clearing, Tom turned to see the creature barreling toward them, jaws snapping and eyes filled with primal fury. "Go," he yelled, pushing Emily ahead of him. She reached the truck and yanked open the door, scrambling inside just as Tom leaped in after her. Emily fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking, and the engine sputtered before roaring to life. Come on," Tom shouted, looking back at the creature, which had now stopped at the edge of the clearing, its breath heavy and ominous. "Drive," he urged, and Emily slammed the gear into reverse, spinning the truck around as they tore away from the clearing, leaving the creature behind. As they drove back toward the office, Tom's heart raced, but a sense of dread filled the air. They had escaped for now, but the reality of what they faced hung over them like a storm cloud. The creature was not just a threat, it was a predator hunting in its territory, and they had entered its domain. Back at the park office, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The other rangers gathered around as Tom and Emily recounted their harrowing encounter with the creature. Hank listened intently, his expression grave. "What we're dealing with here is beyond anything we've encountered," Hank said, his voice steady but serious. "This isn't just an animal, it's something new, and we need to understand it if we're going to keep people safe." Tom nodded, feeling the weight of their responsibility. "We need to set up a perimeter and keep everyone out of the Northwoods until we know more. The last thing we want is for more people to disappear." "Agreed," Hank replied. "I'll contact the state wildlife agency and see if they can send experts to help us. We need eyes on this situation." As the team organized their efforts, Tom couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him. He knew they were in uncharted territory, and the implications of what they had seen were far-reaching. After a long day of meetings and planning, Tom found himself alone in his office, staring at the forest beyond the window. The moonlight bathed the trees in an ethereal glow, and for a moment it seemed peaceful. But deep down, he knew that tranquility was a facade. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Emily. "Meet me at the campfire pit. I need to talk." Curiosity piqued, Tom grabbed his jacket and made his way outside. The chill of the night air wrapped around him, and he felt the weight of the darkness pressing in as he approached the campfire pit, a small clearing where the rangers often gathered. Emily was already there, staring into the flickering flames. Her expression was somber, and Tom could see the fear in her eyes. "Hey," he said softly, taking a seat beside her. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly, "about the creature. What if it's not just hunting? What if it's protecting something?" Tom frowned, considering her words. "Protecting what?" "I don't know, but it's possible. Maybe it has a den or a nest somewhere in the woods. If we stumbled upon it, it could explain why it's acting so aggressively," she replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "That makes sense," Tom said slowly, "but if it's protecting something, it's even more dangerous. We need to be careful." Emily nodded, her eyes flickering with determination. "I want to go back. We need to find out what's really going on out there." "What? Are you crazy?" Tom exclaimed, his heart racing. "You saw what happened last time. It's not safe." "I know, but if we just leave it, we might be letting it get away with whatever it's doing. What if it's a species that's been undiscovered? What if there are more of them?" Emily pressed, her voice rising with urgency. Tom rubbed his temples, torn between fear and curiosity. "You really want to go back out there?" "Yeah, we can go during the day. We'll be more prepared this time. We can track it. Please, Tom. We can't just walk away from this," she pleaded. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky, and Tom felt a mix of dread and excitement stir within him. The thought of uncovering the truth, of discovering something new, was tempting, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. "All right," he finally said, his voice steady. "But we'll do it carefully. We'll gather supplies and make sure we're ready for anything." Emily's face lit up with determination, and Tom felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought of venturing back into the unknown. They needed to understand what they were dealing with, and together they would face whatever dangers awaited them in the shadows of the North Woods. As dawn broke over the park once more, Tom and Emily gathered their supplies, a mix of anticipation and anxiety coursing through them. They had packed flashlights, bear spray, first aid kits, and enough food and water to sustain them for a day in the wilderness. This time, they were determined to uncover the truth behind the creature that haunted the North Woods. "Are you ready?" Emily asked, adjusting the straps of her backpack. Tom took a deep breath, steadying himself. "As ready as I'll ever be." They set out on the trail, the sun filtering through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The familiar sounds of the forest felt different today, charged with a sense of foreboding. Every rustle and creak seemed amplified as they moved deeper into the North Woods. "Do you think we'll find anything?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," Tom replied, scanning the surroundings. "But we need to stay alert. This is its territory now, and we're intruders." As they walked, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like fingers, and he felt the weight of the forest pressing in around them. It was beautiful, yet terrifying. They arrived at the clearing where they had first encountered the creature, and Tom's heart raced at the memories of that night. The underbrush was still flattened, and the air was thick with an unsettling tension. "Let's split up and search the area," Emily suggested, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "We might find more signs." Tom hesitated, but he knew they needed to cover more ground. "All right, but let's stay within earshot. If anything happens, call out." Emily nodded, and they moved in opposite directions, each taking a different path through the thick underbrush. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he searched, his eyes peeled for any signs of the creature. He crouched down, inspecting the ground closely, looking for footprints or other evidence. The scent of damp earth filled the air, and the forest was alive with sounds, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves. But underneath it all was a lingering unease. As he explored, Tom stumbled upon a small cave hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Curiosity piqued, he approached cautiously, peering inside. The darkness loomed ahead, and he could feel a chill emanating from the entrance. "Emily," he called, his voice echoing in the stillness. "You need to see this." A moment later, Emily emerged from the trees, her expression curious. "What did you find?" Tom gestured toward the cave. "I think this might be the creature's den. It's hidden well, and there's a strong smell of something animalistic coming from inside." Emily frowned, glancing at the cave entrance. "Are you sure we want to go in there?" "We need to investigate," Tom replied, his heart racing with both excitement and fear. "This could be where it's nesting, where it keeps its young. If we find out more about it, we can warn everyone." With a deep breath, they stepped into the cave, the darkness swallowing them whole. They switched on their flashlights, illuminating the rocky walls, which were damp and covered in moss. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of earth and something else, something foul. "Watch your step," Tom cautioned, careful not to slip on the uneven ground. As they moved deeper, they discovered remnants of what looked like animal bones scattered across the floor. Tom's stomach churned as he realized the implications. The creature was not only hunting, it was feeding, and this cave was its lair. "Tom, look," Emily whispered, pointing ahead. In the faint glow of their flashlights, they could make out a large, dark shape nestled against the back wall of the cave. Cautiously, they approached, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they drew closer, they could see it more clearly. A massive, dark creature, unlike anything they had ever seen, sleeping peacefully. Tom's breath caught in his throat. It's huge." Emily nodded, her eyes wide with both awe and fear. "What do we do?" "We have to get out of here," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it wakes up, we won't stand a chance." They turned to leave, but just as they reached the entrance, a low growl resonated from behind them, reverberating through the cave. The creature stirred, its massive body shifting as it awoke. "Run," Tom shouted, adrenaline surging as they bolted back into the forest. The ground shook with the creature's movements as it lunged toward them, its growl growing louder, filled with fury. They sprinted through the trees, branches slashing at their faces as they dodged and weaved, the creature hot on their heels. Tom could hear its heavy footsteps pounding the ground, a terrifying reminder of the danger they were in. "Keep going," Emily yelled, her voice a mixture of fear and determination. They broke through the trees into the clearing where they had parked the truck, but just as they reached the vehicle, the creature emerged, blocking their path. Its eyes glinted with rage, and its massive form loomed like a shadow over them. "Get in," Tom yelled, pushing Emily toward the truck. She fumbled with the door handle, her hands shaking as panic set in. "I can't." "Now," he shouted, grabbing her arm and yanking her inside. He jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door just as the creature lunged at them, its claws scraping against the metal with a deafening screech. "Start the engine," Tom shouted, his heart racing as he glanced at the creature, which was now pacing back and forth, its breath fogging up the windows. Emily turned the key, but the engine sputtered. "Come on, come on." With a final turn, the engine roared to life, and Emily threw the truck into gear, slamming on the gas as they tore away from the clearing, the creature's furious roar echoing behind them. As they sped down the dirt road, Tom glanced back, watching as the creature disappeared into the trees, its silhouette fading from view. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We made it," he breathed, relief flooding through him. But even as they drove away, the reality of what they had seen weighed heavily on their minds. The creature was still out there, and they had only scratched the surface of the mystery that lay within the North Woods. After their narrow escape, Tom and Emily returned to the park office, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The atmosphere was tense as they recounted their harrowing experience to Hank and the other rangers. "Are you both all right?" Hank asked, concern etched on his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "We're fine," Tom said, but his voice shook slightly. "But we found its den. It's bigger than we thought, and it's feeding on something out there." The other rangers exchanged worried glances. "We need to put together a plan," one of them said. "If that creature is hunting in our territory, it's a threat to everyone." "I agree," Hank replied, his expression serious. "But we need to gather more information before we take any action. If we don't understand its behavior, we could make things worse." Tom felt a surge of determination. "We can't just leave it. If it's hunting, it could target other campers or hunters. We need to find a way to track it." "Tracking it could be dangerous," Emily interjected, her brow furrowed. "We barely escaped last time. We need to be careful." "Careful doesn't mean doing nothing," Tom argued. "We owe it to the people in this park to protect them. If that creature is a threat, we need to know for sure." Hank nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right, Tom, but we need to approach this strategically. Let's set up some cameras around the area and see if we can gather data on its movements." The team quickly mobilized, setting up motion-activated cameras around the North Woods, strategically placing them near the cave and along the trails where the creature had been sighted. Tom felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation as they worked, knowing that the success of their efforts depended on what they might uncover. As the sun began to set, they gathered around a monitor in the park office, ready to review the footage they had collected. Tom's heart raced with each passing moment, wondering what they would find. "All right, let's see what we've got," Hank said, clicking play. The screen flickered to life, showing the forest in darkness, illuminated only by the camera's infrared light. For several tense minutes, they watched nothing but the stillness of the night, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. Suddenly, movement caught their attention. A shadow flitted across the screen, and Tom leaned in closer, his breath catching in his throat. "There it is," he exclaimed, pointing at the screen as the massive creature came into view, moving with an unnatural grace through the trees. The rangers watched in awe and horror as the creature prowled the forest, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It paused momentarily, sniffing the air, then continued on its path, seemingly oblivious to the cameras capturing its every move. "Look at its size," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's enormous." As they continued to watch, they noticed the creature lingering near a particular area, a small clearing where the underbrush was thick. It seemed to be marking its territory, leaving scratches on the trees as it moved. "What is it doing?" one of the other rangers asked, furrowing his brow. "I think it's protecting something," Tom replied, his mind racing. "Maybe it has a den or a mate or even young." Hank nodded, considering Tom's words. "We need to get a better idea of what it's guarding. If there are young, that changes everything." The tension in the room was palpable as they continued to observe the footage. Hours passed as they recorded the creature's movements, noting the times it appeared and the routes it took. Finally, Hank leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "We have enough data to formulate a plan, but we need to act fast. If there are young, we have to approach this delicately." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her eyes wide. "If we can track down its den and assess the situation, we might be able to relocate the young if it comes to that. But we need to be careful. If that creature feels threatened, it will become more aggressive." Tom felt a sense of urgency wash over him. "We can't let this continue. If it's protecting something, it's only a matter of time before it feels cornered. We have to find that den." The team worked late into the night, reviewing footage and mapping out the creature's movements. They formulated a plan to track down the den the next day, armed with the knowledge they had gained. As Tom lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental. The creature was not just a threat, it was a mystery waiting to be solved, and he felt a mix of fear and excitement at the thought of what lay ahead. The sun rose over the North Woods, casting a golden light through the trees. Tom and Emily gathered with the rangers, the atmosphere buzzing with tension and determination. They were prepared to confront the creature and assess the situation with its den. "We need to stick to the plan," Hank said, his voice firm. "We'll approach carefully, and if the creature is there, we'll observe from a distance before making any decisions." Tom nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They had to do this right. As they trekked through the forest, Tom's mind raced with possibilities. What if there were young? Would the creature allow them to relocate them without a fight? They moved in silence. The only sounds were the crunching of leaves underfoot and the rustling of the wind through the trees. They arrived at the clearing where they believed the den to be located, and Tom's heart pounded in his chest. They spread out, keeping a safe distance as they scanned the area for any signs of movement. Emily nudged Tom, pointing toward a thicket at the edge of the clearing. "Look." In the dim light, they could see the outline of a large structure, half hidden by the underbrush. Tom's breath caught in his throat. That must be it. As they moved closer, the atmosphere grew charged with tension. The air felt thick, and every instinct told Tom they were getting closer to the creature's territory. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the clearing, causing the group to freeze in place. The creature stepped into view, its massive form emerging from the shadows, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Stay back," Hank whispered, raising his hand. "Let's see what it does." The creature sniffed the air, its gaze locking onto the Rangers, and for a moment, they all stood frozen, caught in a battle of wills. It took a step forward, muscles rippling beneath its dark fur, and Tom felt a rush of fear. "Do you see anything?" Emily asked, her voice trembling as she strained to catch a glimpse of what was behind the creature. "Not yet," Tom replied, heart racing. He could feel the creature's intensity, its primal instinct to protect its territory evident in every move. As the creature continued to growl, the Rangers slowly began to back away, trying to de-escalate the situation. Tom's gaze remained fixed on the creature, and as he looked past it, he finally saw what it was guarding. A small nest, nestled against the base of a tree, surrounded by a thicket of branches. "Oh no," Tom whispered, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "There are young." Emily gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What do we do?" Hank's voice was low and steady. "We need to leave. We can't risk a confrontation. If it feels threatened, it could become aggressive, and we're outnumbered." As they began to retreat, the creature watched them closely, its eyes never leaving their figures. They backed away slowly, and just as they turned to leave, a soft whimper came from the nest. Tom paused, glancing back. The sound had drawn the creature's attention, and it moved to shield the young with its massive body, the growl deepening in its throat. "Please, don't," Tom murmured, feeling a pang of sympathy for the creature. It was not just a monster, it was a parent, fighting to protect its young. Once they reached a safe distance, Hank turned to the group, his expression grave. "We can't stay here. We need to regroup and come up with a new plan. If those young are out there, we can't leave them to fend for themselves, but we can't put ourselves in danger either." Tom nodded, feeling a sense of urgency. "We need to find a way to help them. They deserve a chance." As they made their way back to the office, Tom's mind raced with possibilities. He felt a connection to the creature, a realization that it was not just a monster, but a living being with instincts and a fierce desire to protect its young. In the days that followed, the Rangers continued to monitor the creature's movements, setting up additional cameras and gathering data. They worked on finding a safe method to relocate the young without disturbing the mother. The creature's presence weighed heavily on Tom's mind, a constant reminder of the fragile balance between humanity and nature. Finally, after weeks of planning, they were ready to make their move. The team had devised a strategy to create a safe corridor for the young, guiding them away from the den without provoking the mother. As they approached the clearing again, Tom felt a mix of apprehension and hope. They moved carefully, following the plan they had outlined, working together to minimize the risk of confrontation. With the creature nearby, they set up a perimeter, creating a safe zone where they could observe the young without drawing the mother's attention. They positioned themselves strategically, watching the nest, hearts racing in anticipation. "Here we go," Hank said, his voice steady. "This is it." As they watched, the young began to stir, tiny forms moving within the nest. Tom's heart raced as he saw the creature's head lift, its eyes scanning the area. "Let's move," Hank instructed, and they began to execute the plan, carefully guiding the young toward the makeshift corridor they had created. The creature remained vigilant, its growls echoing through the clearing as it monitored their every move. Tom felt a surge of adrenaline as they worked, knowing that the creature was watching, ready to protect its young at any cost. Just as they reached the final stretch, one of the young strayed too close to the mother and she let out a fierce growl, causing the rangers to freeze in place. "Stay calm," Hank whispered, his eyes fixed on the creature. But as the tension mounted, something shifted in the air, a realization that the mother was not just a monster, but a guardian. With one final push, they guided the last of the young into safety, and as they did, the mother's demeanor shifted. She seemed to sense their intentions, her growls softening, her stance relaxing as she backed away from the nest. Tom felt a rush of relief wash over him as they completed the operation. They had managed to relocate the young without a confrontation, and the creature had allowed it. As they returned to the park office, Tom's heart swelled with pride. They had not only protected the campers, but they had also respected the delicate balance of nature. In the days that followed, Tom and Emily worked closely with the Wildlife Agency to find a safe haven for the young creatures, ensuring they would be protected and cared for away from the dangers of the North Woods. As the seasons changed and the forest transformed around them, Tom often found himself reflecting on their experience. The encounter with the creature had changed him, igniting a passion for wildlife conservation and the understanding of the intricate relationships that existed within the natural world. The Northwoods held many mysteries, and as he stood at the edge of the forest, watching the sunset behind the trees, he felt a sense of purpose. A commitment to protect not just the park, but all the lives that depended on it, human and animal alike. Months later, as spring began to bloom in the Northwoods, Tom stood with Emily at the entrance of the park, the air fresh with the scent of new beginnings. "Can you believe it's been this long?" Emily said, a smile on her face. "No," Tom replied, shaking his head in disbelief, "but I wouldn't trade it for anything." Together, they had witnessed the beauty of the wilderness and the importance of coexistence between humans and nature. The creature they had once feared had taught them invaluable lessons, and they were determined to share their knowledge with others. As they prepared to welcome visitors to the park, Tom felt a renewed sense of responsibility. The Northwoods were alive with stories, and he was eager to help others understand the magic that lay within the trees, the mysteries that thrived in the shadows, and the importance of protecting the delicate balance of life. With Emily by his side, he knew they were ready for whatever lay ahead, embracing the adventures that awaited them in the heart of the Northwoods.